Good evening, everybody. How's it going? It's me, Comic Crack, and tonight I wanted to do this for a little while. I've been working kind of nonstop, um, so I just didn't have the time. I didn't read much last week, other than Joe Matt's stuff, which we're going to talk about briefly. I do have a video on Joe from years ago at this point. So I didn't do any videos this weekend. I just couldn't. So I wanted to talk about him for a little while. So Joe passed away on, what was it, September 18th, I believe. So just very recently. And I've been reading like a ton of stuff. I think that there's a lot of people that are going to be way better suited to talk about Joe. Hello, Gorvidal. Talk about Joe than me, but I'm going to do my best, kind of what he meant to me. Obviously, I didn't know him. I've never met him. I'm purely just a person who knows him through the comics. There's been a lot of people when he passed. There was a lot of people. My social media, my Twitter had really seemed like it exploded with people from all areas of my social media that were talking about him. Everybody from artists to fans to writers to creators of all kinds, talking about Joe and his work and what it meant to them. I would direct you to a fantastic Comics Journal article. It came out, what's today? 27th? Yeah, it came out today. Remembering Joe Matt, with a bunch of creators, most importantly, Chester Brown and Seth. And honestly, Seth's piece, Remembering Joe Matt, really got to me quite a bit. Even just thinking about it, I can feel it a bit. His was beautiful. They were both, like, they were all really nice stuff, but that one was really impressive. He was part of that kind of Toronto 3, Joe Matt, Seth, and Chester Brown. They were kind of the core group of guys when Joe moved from, I think, Philadelphia, first to Montreal, possibly, and then to Toronto. I think that's how it went. So check out the Comics Journal article. Our friend Ryan Carey on his Patreon. I think it might have been a Patreon only article. I don't know if it was one that was for free. He also wrote about Joe Matt, did a nice kind of tribute to Joe as well too. And like I said, all over social media, there's been a whole bunch of people for kind of a long time talking about Joe and his comics. The Manga Chat guys, which is Simon Hanselman and who the heck is the other guy? I apologize. I'm blanking on the other artist's name. Sorry about that. They have a great show. I don't watch it all the time. I've seen a few of them. They had a kind of special talking about Joe, talked about him for, I don't know, 40, 45 minutes. That's well worth checking out as well, too. So I've been reading a bunch of Joe stuff. I just read some more tonight, actually. So we'll kind of start at the beginning. We'll just look at some stuff and I'll kind of show some highlights of some of the things I've been reading, or rereading rather, again. I'm not finished rereading all the stuff of his that I have. I'm a good chunk of the way through, though. He didn't have a huge output. I think his solo book, Peep Show, I believe it was 14 issues. There was talk for years. Seth talks about it in his Remembrance of Joe, for years, that he was working on another issue. Apparently, from stuff I've been reading online, that issue was complete, and I believe it's in the hands of a publisher in France. Please don't quote me on any of this stuff. Go and look for it. So hopefully that means it's actually complete, and hopefully that means we do get something else. Peep Show is a hell of a series. It's been collected into, the stuff that exists in single issues has been collected, I think, in 3 books. Poor Bastard, Spent, and another one that I'm drawing a blank on right now. Yeah, I don't remember what it is. Anyway, you can find that stuff. He also had a collection called Peep Show that's kind of sort of magazine size. I do have a copy of it somewhere. I don't know where it is. I'm sure it's in one of these boxes surrounding me here. And that collects a bunch of stuff, including some of this early stuff that we're going to look at that first appeared in Snarf. So when I was reading Chester Brown's remembrance of him, he had mentioned the first time that Seth and him had seen Joe Matt's work. And it was the first time that Joe had anything in print. Issue number 11 of the Fantastic Kitchen Sink anthology, Snarf. It's hard for me to remember where I first discovered his stuff, but on rereading this today, it was most definitely this or the Drawn and Quarterly stuff. So I think he did 3 consecutive issues of Snarf, and then I believe it was in issue 1 of Drawn and Quarterly that he made his next appearance in. He'd done a bunch of issues of Snarf, I think 5 in a row here, and then I believe he was in most, if not all, of the Drawn and Quarterly anthologies. I've only got a handful of those. I don't have Drawn and Quarterly number 1. The earliest one I have is number 2. I haven't reread the Drawn and Quarterly stuff, so it was either this Snarf or Dean Q where I first discovered his work. I don't remember if I was getting this stuff at the time that it came out. It is 1989, so it is possible, but my memory just doesn't work like that. What I do remember about first discovering Joe's stuff is the impact that it had on me, like right from the get-go. I think that there's a bunch of us in this comics kind of world who feel awkward at the best of times and a little socially inept and a little kind of distant from things. So Joe, like a lot of the autobiographical cartoonists, especially in the underground and alternative scenes, their honesty was refreshing, terrifying. It kind of made you feel okay. Hello, Daryl D. It kind of made you feel okay with the shit that you were dealing with. If someone was kind of bold and brave enough to kind of pull the veil back on things that they were going through and things that they had done. Chester does talk about that blurring the line of like, was this Joe Matt? Of course, this was Joe Matt. Were there things that maybe weren't 100% true? Yes. And he tells a little funny anecdote about when Joe kind of first does a comic strip of when he first met in person Chester and Seth. Chester talks about, we met him both at the same time, but he portrayed it as he met Chester first and then met Seth. So kind of a funny little story where you think he's going to talk about something else, but really nicely done. They're both fantastic tributes. So this is from his first published work. And again, this early stuff from Snarf, I believe, was collected in that Peep Show. And right out of the gate, some of the things that you get from Joe, some things you first need to know about Joe Matt. This is what he looks like. This is what he acts like. He was raised Catholic. He's never had a relationship to speak of. So it just kind of goes point by point of things that you should know about him. And right out of the gate, you see some of his kind of trademarks, especially in the early strips, the arrows that appear kind of describing things and sometimes just blatantly calling him out. I think is really great stuff. And you get a little glimpse into kind of his neurosis, I guess, his neurotic nature. And of course, we get introduced to Trish, who's a big part of the early Peep Show and all of these early comics. She was an animator who lived in Montreal, and he went to live with her, kind of moved to Montreal to be with her. And I think eventually they both moved to Toronto. And he talks pretty plainly about his relationship with her, so much so that in an early Peep Show issue, he talks about a time where he hit her, and apparently when that issue came out, that caused a real big stir. He also seems to be one of those creators, like some of the guys who maybe are the best at pulling back that veil and talking about things and not putting themselves in a good light. It ends up coming back to kind of bite them in the ass a little bit. He apparently got a bit of backlash. This is just from reading recently when that stuff came out. And I think a lot of people ended up just dismissing him. Seth talks about in the Comics Journal Remembrance there, he talks about all these things that you saw about Joe. Most of it was true. And It wasn't cute. It wasn't like a little quirk that made him. It was irritating. Seth says he was the most irritating person that he's ever met, but his love for him was huge, as you can tell by the way he writes about him. So it is again, there's this thing of like putting yourself out there and exaggerating your kind of potential flaws, or these quirks and traits that may be on a certain subdued level, and putting them really at the forefront to kind of highlight them, is pretty incredible stuff. But honestly, just his cartooning, I read the Peep Show stuff before I dug into this Snarf, and the leaps and bounds, his art in these is fantastic. I really love it. It's the stuff that brings back the most memories for me, because it's the stuff that, like I said, I first discovered at a really formative time, reading some of this kind of material, these undergrounds and alternative comics. So his art really jumps. There was one here, I think it was in this issue. Yeah. So this is from Snarf with a Richard Corbin cover there, Daryl D. Issue number 12 of Snarf is what we're going to look at here. There's the Corbin cover. There's a amazing strip that just speaks to his ability to, just the kind of mastery that he has, or had rather, over comics and storytelling, where he breaks down, he talks about in this strip, let's look behind what it takes to create a strip and what all of these things mean. But in it, he ends up talking a lot about how comic strips are put together and how this style of storytelling is done, for him, and obviously for a lot of cartoonists. You're in for a treat today, folks, because today I'm going to give you a behind the scenes look at how my strips are done. Talks about things like putting a date on the top, which it was big for him at this time, kind of making it a journal, giving some timeline. He talks about installing a little sprinkler system to the back of my neck to produce all those crucial sweat beads, which you can see up here. He shows off the different masks that he puts in front of himself to give him these different emotions. So he kind of keeps breaking it down. The one thing he doesn't know where they come from are those, there's one thing I've never been able to figure out. It's those little floating labels with arrows. They just seem to happen unpredictably. It's uncanny. I don't understand it. And then you see an example there, if it'll focus. Let's bring that full page. Come on, baby. You know you want to focus. Anyway, it is there. And then finally in this panel over here, we're inside the strip with him as he's looking out the window, again, breaking that wall, to show us that he's sitting on the shitter as he's talking about us, or talking to us rather, and walking us through this creative kind of zone for him. So really got a kick out of that one. So when Chester and Seth read this issue, they were immediately taken with his art. It kind of blew them away in his storytelling. So that led to them having to meet this guy. We've got to meet this guy. And they became kind of an inseparable trio for quite a long time. We won't go through all of these, Snarf. I just wanted to show you a few of those. And then issue number 13, 14, and 15 is where you can find more of Joe Matt's work in the Snarf anthology. So after issue number 13, he goes on to Drawn and Quarterly, and seeing it kind of in a magazine size. I know we've talked about this before, all those years ago in that previous video, but it's worth talking about again. One of the classic strips, and this one is kind of seared in my memory, is this Playtime. Again, when we look at kind of playing with the format and the page layout of a comic strip, we get kind of him at his height as you follow him through this little bit of a roller coaster type of journey throughout the page. Beautiful. And actually, in one of the Snarf strips, Trish, his girlfriend, talks about this playtime strip and saying, like, I didn't know where to read, I didn't know where to go. So giving that idea that he created a large body of work before he started publishing stuff, before he started approaching people to put stuff out. He had who knows how much. I haven't looked into how much exactly he had before that first appearance in Snarf, but you get the impression that he had quite a body of work that he was working on just at home for himself. And I'm curious what the impetus was for him to finally go for it and approach some of these companies to put out his work. Let's see here. Yeah, here we go. And again, the beauty of dating things at the top is you can get that little bit of a timeline. Yeah, I'm not sure why my camera isn't focusing today, but hopefully you're seeing some of that. Maybe we'll try to bring it back a little more. The other thing that he did with some of these drawn and quarterly strips was the panel density just got the pages just got more and more dense as he tried to cram in as much as he possibly could on one page. But it always read it him and his buddy, I think Kevin was his name, Kev. They used to talk in Donald Duck voices. So this is a whole strip of them just kind of communicating in that voice. And it works so well. It's funny. You can hear the voices in your head as they just talk about absolute utter nonsense. Yeah. So, I mean, the guy was amazing. He was really, really amazing. And that's kind of what I wanted to focus on the most. Like I said, being an awkward individual myself for 98% of my life, still dealing with it sometimes, it was really great to read some of that stuff where this guy could look at his flaws and foibles and stuff and really just let it out there. And seemingly from this side of the comic and the news and the magazines, seemingly deal with it in some way, even though I'm sure he dealt with things on a much bigger level personally that obviously, again, I have no idea about, but I can only imagine. So the last thing we'll look at here, another one where I don't have all of the issues, but boy, oh boy, am I on the hunt for this Peep Show. So this is Peep Show number 4. I've got 4, 5, 6, I think 6 issues of the 13. Started out kind of regular comic size, and this kind of had a few different arcs. Yeah, 60 years old there, Gore Vidal. Apparently at his drawing table, and if you read about him, I think it's probably common with a lot of people in the United States. I don't want to generalize too much and maybe not get into it too much, but I can only imagine the fear in the States of maybe having to make doctor's visits when you just don't know how much it's going to end up costing you. Compound that with somebody who lived extremely frugally and maybe didn't. Anyway, yeah. So it just feels like it would have been a challenge, right? So and that's kind of one of the things that the manga chat guys said, that go to the goddamn doctor, because I think it also pairs something that they said, which is also very true, just for men, sometimes generally of a certain age and a certain era, that idea of going to a doctor and it'll be fine, it'll just go away. They kind of say, like, just go to the doctor, just go and get yourself a checkup, just go and visit and talk to somebody, if you have something going on. These were a lot of fun to read, especially these early issues where it's a young Joe Matt, and you can see kind of some of the behaviors that we see that he still had when he was an adult. But honestly, the jump from that early stuff to his style here is quite amazing. And Seth says that he used to agonize over a single line, which is what kind of eventually really slowed him down, because he would just agonize over a line to try to make it perfect. But when you look at these issues, it is gorgeous. It is really, really gorgeous work. So it's him and a friend of his, um, whose name I'm forgetting. Anyway, him and a friend of his, Fairweather. So Fairweather, the poor bastard, and that Fairweather was the other book, I think, and then I can't remember the name of the other one. Completely lost my train of thought. So this era is kind of, again, one of the focuses is on his comic book collecting and how that's kind of taking over his life to some degree, and just his interpersonal dynamics with some of these kids in the neighborhood. Already at this point, he's kind of running angles on people and almost like ripping people off. And there's kids in the neighborhood that want to beat the hell out of him. So he's really good friends with this kind of tough kid in town. And just the way he talks to his parents in this early stuff, like, it's mind-boggling. And I guess that's one of the other things too, like his lettering is really stellar in this stuff too. These were incredibly fun to read. He didn't come home and mow the lawn when his mom said to, so as punishment, she got rid of all his comics, or at least that's what she says. I've never actually read this entire arc, so I don't know how much of this is actually true, if she actually got rid of them, or she's just hiding them. We're being led to believe that she just hid them in her bedroom. And this has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, it looks like 6 issues. So this is the collection that has the very first 6 issues of Peep Show. And this is the poor bastard, and it's really focused on his love life, his addiction to pornography, his interpersonal relationships with some people, a bunch of different people. Chester and Seth do make appearances in here, but not as much as some of the later stuff. But I mean, even look at this panel here. Beautiful. But again, it does a really good job of kind of blurring the line of, he has this couple that he meets, and he writes very, uh, very honestly about lusting after this guy's girlfriend. And then a few issues later on, he shows when they confront him on the street. Yeah, here we go. When they confront him on the street after reading the issue where they make an appearance, and, kind of calling him out, and you're such a scumbag, and how dare you think of my girlfriend in that light, and I don't even like you, the way you portrayed me throwing myself at you, like, that was disgusting. And Seth kind of saying at the end, well, can't say I didn't warn you. You should have disguised them better, as he kind of cowers off there. Great, really great stuff. So this is for Joe Matt, a hell of a cartoonist. One of my favorites. As much as I love all of the Toronto 3, I gotta give a huge shout out to Joe, because his stuff kind of has been with me the longest out of the 3 of them. So thanks very much for hanging out and watching, everybody. Go find some Joe Matt stuff. Read some Joe Matt stuff. I'm sure you can find some on my comic shop. I don't know how easy some of this stuff is to find. I think something like Snarf is pretty easy to find, these later issues. I think Kitchen Sink did a pretty good job with kind of keeping this stuff in print. So I'm sure you can find issues of Snarf out there. Give them a read, and thanks for hanging out. We'll hopefully see you on Sunday. Rasa and I should be back, but we'll see how it goes. Right on. Thanks, everybody.